But the most powerful arguments in favor of a tragic optimism are those in which Latin are called argumenta ad hominem. Jerry Long, to cite an example, is a living testimony to the defiant power of the human spirit, as it is called in logotherapy. To quote the Texarkana Gazette, Jerry Long has been paralyzed from his neck down since a driving accident which rendered him a quadriplegic 3 years ago. He was 17 when the accident occurred. Today, Long can use his mouth stick to type. He attends 2 courses at community college via a special telephone. The intercom allows Long to both hear and participate in class discussions. He also occupies his time by reading, watching television, and writing. In a letter I received from him, he writes, "I view my life as being abundant, with meaning and purpose. The attitude that I adopted on that fateful day has become my personal credo for life. I broke my neck. It didn't break me. I am currently enrolled in my first psychology course in college. I believe that my handicap will not only enhance my ability to help others. I believe that my handicap will only enhance my ability to help others. I know that without the suffering, the growth that I have achieved would be impossible." Our amazing Hardy does. Yeah, the sound is the sound and it's irritating, but like, I love Hardy does. They are descendants of the ibis. And I've actually got a tattoo of an ibis on my leg that is related to Tehuti. If you know about Tehuti, you know about Tehuti. If you don't, go read about Tehuti. He's also called Thoth, but yeah, his original name is Tehuti or Jehuti. Yeah, random facts, I guess. Anyway, yeah. Where was I? I'm going to start on the last lines because I was interrupted, but maybe it's because I needed to read them again. I believe that my handicap will only enhance my ability to help others. I know that without the suffering, the growth that I have achieved would have been possible. I think he's saying it wouldn't have been possible. I know that without the suffering, the growth I have achieved would not have been. I don't know. There's no not here, but I'm guessing it says not. But okay. Is this to say that suffering is indispensable to the discovery of meaning? In no way. I only insist that meaning is available in spite of, nay, even though, suffering, provided, as noted in part 2 of the book, that the suffering is unavoidable. If it is unavoidable, the meaningful thing to do is to remove its cause, for unnecessary suffering is masochistic rather than heroic. If, on the other hand, one cannot change the situation that causes the suffering, he can still choose his attitude. Long had not chosen to break his neck, but he did decide not to let himself be broken by what had happened to him. As we see, the priority stays with creatively changing the situation that causes us to suffer, but the superiority goes to know how to suffer, if need be. And there is empirical evidence that literally the man in the street is of the same opinion. Austrian public opinion pollsters recently reported that those held in highest esteem by most of the people interviewed are neither the great artists nor the great scientists, neither the great statesmen nor the great sports figures, but those who master a hard lot with their heads held high. In turning to the second aspect of the tragic triad, namely guilt, I would like to depart from a theological concept that has always been fascinating to me. I refer to what is called mysterium iniquitatis, meaning, as I see it, that a crime in the final analysis remains inexplicable inasmuch as it cannot be fully traced back to biological, psychological, and other social factors. There's somebody shouting in the background. It's my sister. I hope it's not like, oh man, the beauties of being at home, I guess. I don't know. She's watching something and she's busy reacting to it. Anyway. I think it was just maybe disturbing me. Maybe you guys can't hear it. I don't know. But I'm gonna carry on. Yeah. In turning to the second aspect of the tragic triad, namely guilt, I would like to depart from a theological concept that has always been fascinating to me. I refer to what is called mysterium iniquitatis, meaning, as I see it, that a crime, in the final analysis, remains inexplicable inasmuch as it cannot be fully traced back to biological, psychological, and/or sociological factors. Totally explaining one's crime would be tantamount to explaining away his or her guilt and to seeing him or her not a free and responsible human being, but a machine to be repaired. Even criminals themselves abhor this treatment and prefer to be held responsible for their deeds. From a convict serving his sentence in an Illinois penitentiary, I received a letter in which he deplored that the criminal never has a chance to explain himself. He is offered a variety of excuses to choose from. Society is blamed, and in many instances the blame is put on the victim. Furthermore, when I addressed the prisoners from San Quentin, I told them that you are human beings like me, and as such, you were free to commit a crime, to become guilty. Now, however, you are responsible for overcoming guilt by rising above it, by growing beyond yourselves, by changing for the better. They felt understood. And from Frank E.W., an ex-prisoner, I received a note which stated that he had started a logotherapy group for ex-felons. We are 27 strong, and the newer ones are staying out of prison through the pure strength of those of us from the original group. Only one returned, and he is now free. As for the concept of collective guilt, I personally think that it is totally unjustified to hold one person responsible for the behavior of another person or a collective of persons. Since the end of World War II, I have not become wary of publicly arguing against the collective guilt concept. Sometimes, however, it takes a lot of didactic tricks to detach people from their superstitions. An American woman once confronted me with the reproach, "How can you still write some of your books in German, Adolf Hitler's language?" In response, I asked her if she had knives in her kitchen, and when she answered that she did, I acted dismayed and shocked, exclaiming, "How can you still use knives after so many killers have used them to stab and murder their victims?" She stopped objecting to my writing books in German. The third aspect of this triad concerns death, but it concerns life as well. For at any time, each of the moments of which life consists is dying, and that moment will never recur. And yet, it is not this transitoriness. And yet, is it not this transitoriness a reminder that challenges us to make the best possible use of each moment of our lives? It certainly is, and hence my imperative: live as if you were living for the second time and had acted wrongly the first time as you are about to act now. In fact, the opportunities to act properly, the potentialities to fulfill a meaning are affected by the irreversibility of our lives, but also the potentialities alone are also affected. For as soon as we have used an opportunity and have actualized a potential meaning, we have done so once and for all. We have rescued it into the past, wherein it has been safely delivered and deposited. In the past, nothing is irretrievably lost, but rather, on the contrary, everything is irrevocably stored and treasured. To be sure, people tend to see only the stubble fields of transitoriness, but overlook and forget the full granaries of the past into which they have brought their harvest of their lives. The deeds done, the loves loved, the last but not least, the sufferings they have gone through with courage and dignity. From this one may see that there is no reason to pity old people. Instead, young people should envy them. It is true that the old have no opportunities, no possibilities in the future, but they have more than that. Instead of possibilities in the future, they have realities in the past. The potentialities they have actualized, the meanings they have fulfilled, the values they have realized. And nothing and nobody can ever remove these assets from the past. In view of the possibility of finding meaning in suffering, life's meaning is an unconditional one, at least potentially. That unconditional meaning, however, is paralleled by the unconditional value of each and every person. It is that which warrants the indelible quality of the dignity of man. Just as life remains potentially meaningful under any conditions, even those which are most miserable, so too does the value of each and every person stay with him or her, and it does so because it is based on the values that he or she has realized in the past, and is not contingent on the usefulness that he or she may or may not retain in the present. More specifically, this usefulness is usually defined in terms of functioning for the benefit of society. But today's society is characterized by achievement orientation, and consequently, it adores people who are successful and happy, and in particular, it adores the young. It virtually ignores the value of all those who are otherwise, and in doing so, blurs the decisive difference between being valuable in the sense of dignity and being valuable in the sense of usefulness. If one is not cognizant of this difference and holds that an individual's value stems only from his present usefulness, then believe me, one owes it only to personal inconsistency not to plead for euthanasia along the lines of Hitler's program. That is to say, mercy killing of all those who have lost their social usefulness, be it because of old age, incurable disease, mental deterioration, or whatever handicap they may suffer. Confounding the dignity of man with mere usefulness arises from a conceptual confusion that in turn may be traced back to the contemporary nihilism transmitted on academic campus and many an analytical couch. Even in the setting of training analyses, such as indoctrination, may take place. Nihilism, however you say it. Yeah, I know it can be said in both ways, but anyway, does not contend that there is nothing, but it states that everything is meaningless. And George A. Sargent was right when he promulgated the concept of learned meaninglessness. He himself remembered a therapist who said, "George, you must recognize that the world is a joke. There is no justice. Everything is random. Only when you realize this will you understand how silly it is to take yourself seriously. There is no grand purpose in the universe. It just is. There's no particular meaning in what decision you make today and how you act. One must not generalize such a criticism. In principle, training is indispensable, but if so, therapists should see their task in immunizing the trainee against nihilism rather than inoculating him with the cynicism that is a defense mechanism against their own nihilism. Logotherapists may even confirm to some of the training and licensing requirements stipulated by other schools of psychotherapy. In other words, one may howl with the wolves, if need be, but when doing so, one should be, I would urge, a sheep in wolf's clothing. There is no need to become untrue to the basic concept of man and the principles of the philosophy of life inherent in logotherapy. Such a loyalty is not hard to maintain in the view of the fact that, as Elizabeth S. Lucas once pointed out, throughout the history of psychotherapy, there has never been a school as undogmatic as logotherapy. And at the first World Congress of Logotherapy, I argued not only for the rehumanization of psychotherapy, but also for what I called the de-gurification of logotherapy. My interest does not lie in raising parrots that just rehash their master's voice, but rather in passing the torch to independent and innovative and creative spirits. Sigmund Freud once asserted, "Let one attempt to expose a number of the most diverse people uniformly to hunger." With the increase of the imperative urge of hunger, all individual differences will blur, and in their stead will appear the uniform expression of the one unstilled urge. Thank heaven Sigmund Freud was spared knowing the concentration camps from the insides. His subjects lay on a couch designed in a plush style of Victorian culture, not in the filth of Auschwitz. There, the individual differences did not blur, but on the contrary, people became more different. People unmasked themselves, both the swine and the saints. And today, you need no longer hesitate to use the word saints. Think of Father Maximilian Kolbe, who was starved and finally murdered by an injection of carbolic acid at Auschwitz, and who in 1983 was canonized. You may be prone to blame me for invoking examples that are exceptions to the rule. Sed omnia praeclara tam difficultia quam rara sunt. But everything great is just as difficult to realize as it is rare to find, reads the last sentence in the Ethics of Spinoza. You may, of course, ask whether we really need to refer to saints. Wouldn't it suffice to just refer to decent people? It is true that they form a minority. More than that, they always will remain a minority. And yet I see therein the very challenge to join the minority. For the world is in a bad state. But everything will become still worse unless each of us does his best. So let us be alert in a twofold sense. Since Auschwitz, we know what man is capable of. And since Hiroshima, we know what is at stake. Sure. Yeah. I admit I haven't read the whole book yet, but after reading that last part, I definitely need to make sure. Like, I've read a bit of the beginning, and now I read the last part for you guys, so I've got like a whole middle section. But yeah, wow, that I enjoyed reading that, and I hope you enjoyed hearing that. A lot of big words there, but the meaning is the meaning, you know. Yeah, this is just it's so relevant, you know. I think it's just the world is tough right now, you know, and I'm saying that like the world was not tough before or whatever. No, like, and so cultivating like a sense of hope, you know, cultivating a sense of meaning, is a beautiful thing. And I, like, about myself, you know, as I said, I'm an activist, you know. So my activism started when I was suffering. So I was diagnosed with multi-drug resistant TB as a medical student, and it was rough because I got it from hospital. Like, I was in the hospital and I was infected in the hospital, you know. And so I suffered, man, I suffered, and it was so painful, and it was so hard to describe to people, and I felt like nobody understood me, and I was suicidal. I had plans to do the thing, to end it all, you know. And yeah, sorry about that, trigger warning. Yeah, but in that time, I started speaking up about TB. I started educating people about TB. I started talking to other medical students and other health professionals to tell them that, look, listen, this thing is out there. It's not just like something you get from behaving badly or something you get because you live in a 1-bedroom house. You breathe, right? Yeah, okay, so you're at risk, you know? Which really back then was something that seemed odd to some people. They were just like, look, no, we come to work and it's our patients that come with the sicknesses. But babes, like, TB is airborne, you know? My point is, I was giving up until I found meaning in my suffering. I found meaning because all of a sudden, I was a medical student who understood what it was like to be a patient, you know? And I can't tell you enough of like how much it really improved my practice. Like when I went back to medical school, everything was relevant. You know, I understood what it was to suffer. You know, I understood what it was to have to go through the public health system and like take pills every day and like being scared that I'm going to die from either the treatment or the disease itself, or I was going to end it myself, you know. But I really found so much meaning in educating others and encouraging other people to make choices, to make good choices about their health, you know, to when there's somebody, if they're seeing a patient that has TB, to make sure that, you know, the patient has a mask on, that you have a mask on, that the person is in a room that has adequate circulation, that has extractor fans, that like, and these principles are principles of infection prevention and control. But basically, you got to do the right thing to prevent yourself from getting it. And I wanted to show people, I kept saying, you know, I don't want someone else to have to go through the suffering. You know, if I can tell them what it's like, you know, and those who are going through it, if I can encourage them as I was encouraged, you know, you can survive, you can live past it. And it's tough because people are still dying of TB, you know. I'm sorry, I've gone into my activism and my advocacy, but just like, hear me out. I know that I survived, first of all, because of the support that I got in that time. And it was difficult to get that support, but I'm so grateful I did. But I also know that I survived because I found meaning. You know, I decided that I was going to become that person, you know, from my experiences as a medical student, as a TB survivor, a TB patient, as a part of civil society. Then I became a doctor. So all of a sudden, I was actually able to understand when like somebody comes to me and says, look, I'm struggling to take this treatment. And I'm just like, oh, girl, I know that feeling. I know it. Let me tell you, you know, and they're just like, what, doctor, you too, you also had TV. And I'm just like, yeah, my bro, like, yeah, like it happens. But look at me now, like I'm smiling, I'm happy, I'm healthy, and you can be smiling and healthy and happy too, you know. So I found deep meaning in my suffering, and it was rough. It was so rough, but I love that I can still do my advocacy work today, because a lot of it was pushing for social support of people that have TB, you know, something that wasn't really being spoken about back then. They were just kind of giving us pills and saying, take them, you know, but I really used my own story to understand what was missing in the global fight against TB, you know, and I know that my work over the last 10 to 11 years has definitely seen some changes. I know that there were changes at the institution where I studied. You know, I know there've been changes at locally, regionally, over South Africa, in Africa, even internationally, because I got to use my voice to really talk about what was going on and be the voice who like use my story to improve the lives of other people, you know. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on the matter. But yeah, as difficult as that period of my life was, I'm grateful, you know, for it, the lessons learned. I'm grateful that I survived, and I love the work that I've gotten to do afterwards. And it really, I gave myself meaning. You know, I decided that this is tough, but this is what I'm gonna do with it, you know. And this is not to say I'm this perfect individual that, you know, when tough things happen, I'm just like, yeah, I know, it's like, it's gonna, you know, I'm not that girl. I be crying, I be cussing, I be fighting, I be, you know. But I really just wanted to, I guess, tell you guys about a time where I found meaning in my suffering. Has there been a time where you found meaning in your suffering? Please let me know. Let's chat in the comments. Reach out if you need to. But yeah, it's even like gotten like a bit darker. It's like, but I like it. It's cool. Anyway, that's it from me. You are so loved. You're so loved.